We turn to another topic in the news, Israel's war in Gaza. Now, Scott, this war has been raging 6 months now, and you did a lot of polling to find out where Americans stand on that.
Yes, and you have to kind of keep this time frame in mind. October 7th was the horrible date that we all saw the atrocities and the news broke. People had a visceral reaction, and they've been changing over the last 6 months. So let's go back to where things were in October. 62% of voters nationwide told us we should be siding with Israel in this conflict. Only 8% said they wanted to side with the Palestinian group. As the war has gone on and people have seen the reality of it, support for Israel has fallen pretty dramatically from 62% all the way down to 37% now. 8% initially thought we should be supporting the Palestinian groups. That's up to 14%. Now, as you can tell, what's also happening is a lot more people are saying, we just want to stay out of it.
Okay.
But there's some interesting groups, some interesting ways of looking at this data beyond just who should we support. One is, do you approve of Israel's response? I mean, they were attacked, they responded. Initially, 56% of voters said, yeah, we think they're doing right. Hardly anybody said no. There was a lot of, again, we're not really quite sure what's going on.
Okay.
Those numbers have changed an awful lot. Only 42% of voters now tell us they approve of Israel's response to the October 7th attacks. 40% disapprove. So the country's pretty evenly divided on this part.
And do you ask them specifically what leads them to their opinion? Or is it just a gut feeling?
These are gut feelings. When we do a tracking poll like this, we're not talking to the same people. We're talking to random samples. So this is to give us a sense of the movement, the public movement. Within surveys, we do ask questions, but we can't say to somebody, well, back in October, you told us this.
Okay.
Now, what we can do is look at demographics. Senior citizens right away instinctively said we're supporting Israel. 85% to 2% for the Palestinian groups. Over time, that has shifted. 51%, still most or half of seniors are saying we should be on Israel's side, 6% with the Palestinian groups. But again, that growing sense of maybe we should stay out of it.
Okay.
Things look much different when we go to younger voters. Initially, they were kind of supporting Israel. We saw the attacks. It was pretty horrible attacks on a lot of young people. So 43% of voters under 35 initially said we should be siding with Israel, 19% the Palestinian groups.
That really does surprise me. I mean, just to think what we saw and the music festival, and a lot of us thought those could be my kids, or I'm sure this group thought this could be me. I thought that'd be higher.
Well, there has been, a sea change, a generational change in America in terms of Israel overall. And by March of this year, 6 months after the fighting, these numbers have flipped. Among younger voters, 35% now say we should be supporting the Palestinian groups, 19% Israel. Look, we've seen a lot of this on college campuses. We've seen a lot of it in different educational settings. And this is, back when I was a kid, we talked about the generation gap a lot. This is a very real generation gap. Now, questions about a ceasefire. This goes back to what I talked about in the opening segment. We tend to say, oh, should there be a ceasefire? If you ask that, people say, of course, we hate war.
Love ceasefire.
Right.
That's great. Okay.
If you just ask that and you're assuming that voters know all the details, you're going to get a misleading impression. And what I mean by that, just take a look at this one number here. If there's a ceasefire, what are the conditions? Must Hamas, should it be required that Hamas publicly support, publicly acknowledge Israel's right to exist? 61% say yes. Only 11% say no. And by the way, another 28% are not sure. But what we're seeing here is people are saying, yes, we should have a ceasefire. Yes, we're having our doubts. Remember, 40% of voters disapprove of the way Israel's responding. But they're also saying, wait a minute, if there's a ceasefire, there have to be some concessions along the way. So this is, part of that challenge of polling. You have to frame the questions and make sure you find out what people are thinking beyond the surface question of should there be a ceasefire.
Did you go further and ask about the hostages or anything else?
Yes, we asked about lots of different examples, and not surprisingly, freeing the hostages, top of the list.